Oh, it's telling me it's being recorded.
Yes, it's done.
Good.
It's recording now.
Right. So, yes, good evening, everybody. So, can I just find out how many of you were here last year for the CV session? Is there a way of everybody putting their hands up or just typing yes in the chat if you did the CV session last year? Hands up. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there's quite a few people and a few yeses. Yeah. Okay. But a few people weren't. Okay. So it might be useful if you weren't at that CV session when you share your email with Ruby in order to get the slides and the cover letter template for this session. She can also send you the CV template and the recording from that session that we did last year, because we're going to talk about cover letters today and about confidence going for an interview. But of course, in order to get that interview, you need a CV as well. And your cover letter is obviously accompanying your CV when you send it to an employer. And the CV is the really important bit. So if you didn't do that session last year, then obviously Ruby can send you those materials and that template as well. And if anybody's got any questions on the CVs, we can cover those at the end as well. Okay, so I'm just going to share some slides. Just give me a minute. Okay, can you see that okay, Ruby?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so we're going to cover two topics today. The first one is, as I said, about cover letters, which are, something that you send to an employer to accompany your CV. And then we'll talk later about the preparation that you can do for an interview before you go. Okay, so let's start on cover letters. So what I want you to do first is just type in the chat, just have a few little minutes to have a think yourself. Why do you think a cover letter is important to send to an employer accompanying your CV? Why do you think it's important to send a letter as well? So just have a little type in the chat what you think. Or if anybody wants to just put the camera on, just put the microphone on and say what they think. Why do you think a cover letter is important?
I think there's one in the chat. To express interest in the
Okay, to
job
express
opportunity.
interest in the job opportunity. Yep, Sebastian, good. Anything else? No?
Yeah. Dr. Amanda, I have something to say, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so I believe a cover letter allows you to express yourself beyond the resume, like in a personal way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you imagine you're an employer and you just get a CV through the post or just a CV attached to an email, you wouldn't know who it had come from. You wouldn't know who the person was, why they'd applied for the job. Let's just put in cover letters provide employers with additional information about the applicant. Absolutely. Gives a general overview about who you are and where they're from. Absolutely. It's like an introduction to you, isn't it, Gloria? So you would never just send an email with an attachment with your CV without actually typing in the email, dear whoever it was, please find attached my CV. You would always put something else to introduce yourself, say where you'd found out about the job, and express your interest in that job, just so they know what it is that you're applying for. Okay, so yeah, that's what it's for. It's that introduction to you that's important to that employer. Okay, So yeah, so it's a very important part of that application. It's going to generate interest in you. It's going to motivate that employer to want to know more about you. And it demonstrates that you've put some thought into your application. A lot of employers have a very standard application form that they want you to fill in as well. But if they haven't got one of those, just sending a CV, it just looks a little bit lazy, doesn't it? So having a bit of a cover letter with it, explaining all about yourself and why you're interested in the employer and why you're interested in the job, it just shows that you've put some thought into it. And it can personalize your approach as well. So you can use, if you use the CV template that we shared with you last time, if you use a similar header on your cover letter, then it shows that you've thought about your personal branding, that you're thinking about that image that you're showing to that employer. So if you use the same font and style and format as your CV, it shows that you've put that care and attention into your application. So it only needs to be one A4 page, but it needs lots of different information in it. So we'll talk through that.
Yeah.
So this is what I was explaining about mirroring your CV. So this is the CV template on the left that we showed you last time, with Ruby's name and address and mobile number and email address. And the start of the CV is obviously the education part. But then if you use the same header, obviously you don't have to use these exactly the same, but whatever you use, make sure that your cover letter and your CV mirror each other so that an employer can see that you've taken that care and attention over making sure it looks like it's come from the same person. Okay, so you always start with the address and the person that you're sending the application to, and obviously put the date at the top. Now,
Amanda, I think your slides is not moved to the next one.
Oh dear, what's going on here?
It's still on.
Let me just see what's going on. Sorry about that. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the demonstration of the cover letter on the right with the same header that we used for the CV on the left. So your name and your address, exactly the same.
I think if you put it on the presenter mode, it will be bigger enough so that we can see.
Okay, let me just, sorry, I'm on my laptop, so it's,
Oh, okay.
Can you see that? Can you see that okay still?
Not yet.
No, it's disappeared. Oh dear. Let me just close the chat. Let me see if I can share the entire screen. Let me do it that way. Is that better?
Yes, that's
Excellent. So I'll do share screen rather than share window. Okay, so does that moved? That moved okay?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I've sent Ruby a template that obviously you can share afterwards, that's got an actual Word document with a template that you can use. So obviously just change your information in it and fill in the relevant information. So you need your address, the address of the company that you're applying for, and then the first paragraph. Ideally, you need a person to write to, but if you haven't got a named person, you can put dear sir or madam, and then start your letter by introducing yourself. Say who you are, what you're studying, which university you're at, just so they've got a nice introduction. So yeah, I'm currently studying for a bachelor's of marketing, for example, at the University of Ghana. And then tell them what you're applying for. And I wish to apply for the position of sales executive in the Ankara region. It's important for them to know where you saw the position advertised. So here the example says, as advertised on your website. You could have heard about the job from one of their employees who you already know. They could have come to a careers fair at your university and they could have advertised the job there. or you could have seen it on a careers site, but they need to know how their marketing is working. And it's important for them to know, if you knew anything about the company, whether you're just applying randomly for a load of different jobs or whether you've specifically sought out their job. So it's important to tell them how you found out about that position. So yeah, who you are, what you're studying, what you're applying for, and how you found out about it. And if the job has a reference number, it's good to put this in at this point. So you could put for the position of sales executive, and then you could just put reference number in brackets and put the reference number of the job. They don't always have reference numbers, but if it's a big company and they're advertising lots of jobs at the moment, then it'll have a reference number as well. And that way they can direct your application directly to the person or department who's dealing with the applications. So that's the first paragraph. It doesn't need to be very long, just a couple of lines introducing who you are and which job you're applying for. Okay, so that's the first paragraph. The second paragraph needs to tell them why you want to work with them. So this is where you need to have done some research about the company themselves and about the industry that the company is in. Think about their competitors. What is it about this company that attracts you as opposed to everybody else in that industry? So tell them why you're interested in their organisation and what in particular attracts you to them. Is it about the company values? Is it about the culture at the company? Is it about the different products that they make? Are you a customer for them? Have you bought their products in the past? Is it about particular innovations that they've come up with? Or is it something deeper than that? Is it about their ethics or their sustainability policies? So what is it that makes you want to go and work for them? So you need to have done your research and put something personal to you about why you want to work for them. They do get a lot of applications, so try and make it personal. So yeah, what excites you about working for them? And be really specific here. Don't just say, "Oh, I'm looking for a placement," or "I'm looking for a graduate role," and you are the top 10 in whatever industry it is. Try and demonstrate that you've done your research. You know a little bit about the company, where they sit within the industry. So you can say something really specific that demonstrates that you've done your homework. Okay, so that's the second paragraph, all about why you want to work for them. So try and keep each paragraph to a particular topic. So the first one is about you, what you're applying for, where you saw the advert. The second one is really specifically about why you want to work for them and show your research. And then the third paragraph needs to explain why specifically you want the job that you've applied for. So the second paragraph is about why you want to work for that company. This part is about why that particular job. Now, this doesn't matter whether you're applying for graduate roles or you're applying for placements, wherever you are in your career, you need to explain how this particular job fits in with you at your current stage in your career. So you need to have read the job description at this point. So the previous paragraph is all about doing your research about the company and them in general in terms of the industry and their products and services. This paragraph is specifically about the job. So look at the job description, have a look at the skills they need. Why you'd be good at this job comes a little bit later, but this is more about the day-to-day of this job. Why would it fit with your current state, where you are in your career, why you'd love to do this job, and how it's going to help you develop, for example. Okay, so that's paragraph 3, quite a short one, but why specifically about that job? And then the fourth paragraph lets them know why you think you would be good at it. So the previous one is about why you want it. This paragraph is why you think you would be good at it. So think about the skills that you've got. why you think you will be a good choice for them for this particular job. Why should they interview you out of all the other people who've applied? So again, you need to have read the job description at that point. See the section that talks about the skills that they're looking for, the qualifications that they may need, and pick out things that you know that they want that are skills that you have, and perhaps give them some examples of where you've demonstrated those skills. So this is all about why they should interview you. Okay. Now, each of these paragraphs is only maybe a couple of lines, perhaps 3 or 4 lines at the most. So you're filling just an A4 page with some nice, well-crafted paragraphs that each have a different flavour to them, a different topic about them. So you've covered the majority of the things that they need there. You've told them who you are, what you're applying for, why that company, then why that job, and then finally this paragraph, why you. Why should they be interested in you? Why you would be a good choice. And then finally, just a little line or two on the end, just to re-emphasize your enthusiasm. A final few words saying, thank you very much for reading this cover letter. Tell them that you've enclosed your CV, or if it's an email, tell them that you've attached your CV. And at this point, whilst you're thanking them for considering you, you're hoping that the next communication you get from them is going to be an interview. So it's important at this point to tell them what your availability is. So if you're doing exams at the moment and you're not going to be available until the end of July, tell them you'll be available for interview from the 1st of August or something like that. Or if you've got a particular internship to do over the summer and you're looking for jobs starting in September, say that you're currently working full time, but you're available for interview whenever they would like to see you. If you've got a holiday booked, you can be honest at this point. Nobody's going to want you to cancel your holiday for an interview. So just say, I'm away for the week of the 22nd of July. I'm available from the 1st of August for interview, or something like that. So just be honest about your availability, but thank them for considering you. Okay, so that's all a cover letter needs to be, just a single A4 page. It shows that you've really thought about your application. It shows that you've done your homework on the company. It shows that you've really thoroughly analysed the job description and you know the sort of person that they're looking for, and you know that you fit that job description, and you're capable of pulling out from your CV a few of the skills that you've got that really match that job description. And you're showing to the company that you genuinely want to work for them. You're not just sending your CV out to every company that's advertising at the moment. You're genuinely putting some thought into each application that you send. So it's really personal to them. You can never send the same cover letter to more than one company because it's going to be really well tailored to the company that you're sending it to. Okay, so that's all about cover letters. I do just want to mention speculative letters. So you would send a cover letter with your CV if a job had been advertised. So if you'd seen it on a website or on a job site, or somebody had told you about the job description, you might have a job reference number, and you might know exactly which department it's going to be in and which person to write to. So you would send that cover letter to that particular person, enclosing your CV. Now, if you're just looking for work experience, or there's a particular company that you really want to work for that isn't currently advertising, you could still send your CV to that company to ask if they've got any opportunities. Perhaps you'd like to do a little internship with them just to show your interest. Perhaps you're just looking for some experience and there's a company down the road from where you live, for example, that you think it would be really good to work for. So you can send what we call a speculative letter to that company to accompany your CV. So this is when you're not applying for a specific job that's being advertised. So you're just accompanying your CV, because obviously somebody gets a CV through the post, they're going to be really confused as to why you've sent it if they're not currently advertising a job. So this letter explains to them what it is that you're looking for. And ideally, a speculative letter, you need to have a named person to write to. So on LinkedIn, find out somebody who works for the company, see if you can ring up and see if you can find a named person that you can write to. Because if just a random letter appears on their doorstep, they're not going to know who it's for. It's best to have a named person in this case. Now, because there isn't a job description, you need to be really specific in the case of a speculative letter to let them know exactly what you're looking for. So it's not a permanent job, they're not advertising one, but you could be asking for a week's work experience or a short internship over the summer. You could be just wanting to have a look round and perhaps spend a couple of days in the office. You could be wanting a month working in their marketing team. It doesn't matter what it is you're asking for, but be really specific. Otherwise, how can they create that position for you? So tell them what it is you're looking for, whether it's experience, internship, or part-time work, and then tell them what sort of work you want. So do you want to work in a finance department? Do you want to work in a marketing department? Do you want to have a look in their R&D department, do something technical? So tell them what sort of work it is you're looking for. And then tell them what skills you've got that could be useful to them. So again, this is where you need to have done your research, find out what sort of work the company does and where you think you could fit into that organisation. So I sent one of these letters when I was at the end of my second year of my degree. So I did a biochemistry degree originally, and I knew I wanted to work in a lab. That was always my career goal. And I didn't think I'd got enough experience in actual practical laboratory skills. So I thought it would be really good to spend the summer at the end of my second year before I did my finals, actually getting some actual lab experience, because I knew I was going to have a big project to do as part of my final year of my degree. And there was a chemistry firm down the road from where I lived at home in the little town that my grandmother lived in. So I knew about it. I'd driven past it many times and I thought, I'll just drop them a letter and enclose my CV and ask if they've got any opportunities over the holidays. So I explained I was doing a biochemistry degree, but I lived locally and I was home for the summer. And I was really interested in getting some really basic laboratory experience. And I said I wasn't looking for a particularly well-paid position, just something to do over the summer to boost my laboratory skills. And I was really fortunate that the director of the chemistry lab rang me up and said, we've never really thought about having anybody in temporarily over the summer before. But he said it's actually a really good idea because we have obviously a certain number of staff that we employ throughout the year. But in the summer, they all want to go on holiday and we end up really short staffed. And a lot of the work that they did was really on a real tight turnaround. There's lots of testing of chemicals. And he said, we always end up really, really busy in the summer because people are on holiday. He said, I've never even thought of taking on an intern over the summer, but he said, I'm prepared to give it a go. And if it works out with you, we might do this every summer. So I spent 12 weeks in their lab, basically covering each week for somebody who was on their holidays. I had a great time. There was somebody who who was at my school, who worked for the company as well. And she actually gave me a lift to work every day for the whole summer. And I hadn't seen her for a couple of years. So it was really good. They paid me just minimum wage, just, enough to say that they were paying me, but not very much. But it wasn't about that. It was about the experience. So the worst thing that they can do is say no. You really can't lose anything. Just for the effort of writing a letter that really asks very politely what you're looking for and why. And you just never know when they may think, oh, actually, that's a really good idea. Yeah, we'll give you a go. We're looking for somebody to do some admin at the moment or something. You just never know when you could get a really good opportunity. Okay, so that's speculative letters, more for when there isn't an actual job description that you're applying to. Okay, so has anybody got any questions on cover letters or speculative letters at this point before we move on to talking about the preparation that you would do for an interview? Let's get the chat back up. Oh, brilliant! Thank you, Gloria. And we'll send you the template so that you can follow each of those paragraphs in turn. Okay, anybody got any more questions? No? Good. Right, so we'll go on to talking about the preparation that you can do before you go to an interview. So obviously, applying for the job is the first thing. You get your CV ready, and obviously those of you who were in the CV session last time, hopefully you've got a good CV in place now. And if you haven't, then Ruby can share that template with you so you can get your CV ready. You send your CV with the cover letter to the employer, and hopefully, fingers crossed, you get a message back saying, please come for interview. Now, it depends on the sort of company that it is as to... Sorry, Hilary, could you take us to the speculative letter once again? Okay, yeah, so it has exactly the same format as the cover letter, but it's more... Well, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's more speculative. It's when there isn't a job description to apply for. So you still start off with exactly the same first paragraph, which is who you are, what you're studying, but then you need to say, I'm looking for some work experience, as opposed to I'm wanting to apply for this particular job. Then you need exactly the same second paragraph. Why do you want to work for them? In my case, it was, you're the nearest local chemistry firm to where I live at home. There's not particularly anything. I don't want a career with you. I'm just looking for some work experience, and I think what you do is really interesting. So always be complimentary about them as to why you want to work for them. But then instead of the skills that you've got that match the job description, you need to talk about the skills you've got that you think would be useful to them. And it does take a little bit more research for a speculative letter because you haven't got that job description. So sorry, I'm just going to mute this person. No, she's muted herself. That's fine. Okay. Is it necessary to always include a cover letter? Esther, yes, I think it is. Just sending your CV with no explanation for why you're sending it. The employer's going to either receive your email with just a CV attached, or just receive a CV in the post, and they wouldn't know who you were, why you were applying, and why you're interested in the company. So it's a very lazy way to just send your CV on its own. And I think most employers would just ignore an email that arrived with just a CV attached. I think you definitely need to introduce yourself and explain why you're applying. Mahama, is the clear distinction between a cover letter and an application letter? I would say they were the same thing. An application letter is effectively a letter that goes with your CV, and we just call it a cover letter. So I would say they're the same thing. So you can use the template for the same thing. Okay, so yeah, that all important interview. So it depends what sort of right, I'm going to go share my screen again and go back to my slides. Okay, preparing for interviews. So it depends what sort of company you're going for an interview at as to what sort of questions that you might get. So there are two types of interview. A standard interview, which small companies may do, small charities perhaps, social enterprises, but small to medium-sized companies tend to do a very standard interview. And I'll give you some example questions that you can start preparing your answers for. And then the bigger companies, the more multinational companies, do what we call competency-based interviews. Now, they would start off with a few questions that you would expect in a standard interview, but then they would move on to the competency-based interview questions. And you can be very prepared for both styles of questions. So I'll talk you through some of the ways that you can prepare for both sorts of questions. So with a standard interview, the questions that they're likely to ask are basically about you and the choices you've made in your life so far. So, why did you choose the university that you're at? Or why did you choose the particular degree subject that you're studying? And what they're looking for here is for you to demonstrate the passion that you have for the subject that you're studying and the university that you chose. Because the next important choice that you're going to make in your life is which company that you're going to go and work for. And they'll want to know that you're choosing your employer with the same logic and the same passion about the other choices that you've made so far. So letting them know why you chose your university and why you chose your degree subject demonstrates your interest, the things that make you you. So don't be afraid to be really honest at this point. So I don't know whether you went to an open day and the people showing you around were really lovely and welcoming, or is the university particularly highly ranked in the league tables? But then when you went to the open day, you just loved the campus. Or on your degree subject, was it a subject that you were really good at school and you see yourself having a career in this subject area? Why did you choose that particular subject? So don't be afraid to show your genuine passion for the choices you've made in your life so far. The next set of questions is more digging into your evaluation of yourself. So they may ask what strengths you've got, what skills do you bring to this particular job that they're advertising. And here's where you need to have read the job description again. So make sure you point out something that they've put on their job description. If they say they're looking for somebody who's got really good time management skills, is really creative, and works well in a team, then when they ask you about your strengths, it would be really good to pick out some of those things to talk about and say, oh yeah, I've worked in teams, I've had a part-time job, and I've demonstrated how collaborative I can be, or whatever it is that matches their job description. So don't be afraid to give some examples of where you've demonstrated those strengths that they need for that job. Sometimes they're a little bit mean, and as well as asking about your strengths, they also ask about your weaknesses. They may make it sound a little bit more positive and say, what are your areas for development? But sometimes they just say, do you know what your weaknesses are? Again, they're looking for you to be honest. You're not the finished product yet. You're still a student, or you're just graduating. You're just going into the workplace. You haven't got a huge amount of experience. So demonstrating that you know what you're good at, but know where you're going to need some training. So be honest about the things that you think they're going to need to give you a little bit of help with. And you can make it positive. You can say that throughout your degree, you've been working on particular areas. Perhaps you didn't have particularly good time management when you first started your degree, but balancing all your different subjects, you're now much better at time management. Or so talk about things that you've worked on, so that at least you recognize what you've achieved over the last couple of years. So these questions are all about you and your motivations. Now, so these are the obvious starting questions. They're asking you these kind of things because there is no right or wrong answer. They're trying to find out about you, to see whether you would fit into their organisation. There's no way you can get these questions wrong because it's about you. So the companies that go on to the more complicated questions later, they tend to use these standard interview questions as a bit of a starting point. They may ask you how your journey was, or have you travelled far, or just to settle you in, to make sure you're feeling comfortable. But then these questions are all about you and your motivations. So yeah, some companies, this is all that they do. They may ask something a little bit more technical if it's a particularly technical job, but you can be really prepared for all of these questions. And I've sent Ruby a list of questions that you can start getting answers ready for. Now, you don't want to have an answer ready written that you would read out. Obviously, then it needs to sound natural and unrehearsed. But you can practice with a friend. Write yourself some answers out and then practice reading them so that it sounds like they just trip off your tongue without any effort. But you would hate to get to an interview and them say to you, so why did you choose to study marketing? And you just go blank and think, oh, that was a really obvious question. I really should have prepared for that. You wouldn't want to get there and be unprepared for the real obvious stuff that they're going to ask you. So, as I say, I've given Ruby a list of questions that you can prepare for. Okay, so yeah, so make some notes, practice with a friend, just a couple of sentences for each answer. And just be honest, there's no trick questions. They're just trying to find out about you. And yeah, they're designed to be easy. They're just trying to check that you can hold a conversation, that you're confident speaking. But they're easy questions, so you shouldn't struggle to answer them. Okay, so those are the standard interview questions. And they could be the basis for just a short interview for a small company. But if the company is going to do a competency-based interview, then those nice, easy starting questions are just the introduction. They're going to go on to some slightly more complicated questions. Again, you can still prepare for them, but they are a little bit more technical. So we'll move on to just talking about those now. So these big companies, and we're talking about the big multinational companies, the ones that have the big graduate schemes, they tend to have perhaps 5 or 6 core values to the company. They call them competencies, but they're used for all aspects of the organisation, not just recruitment. Now, there's a company called Baxter Healthcare that one of my placement students went to a couple of years ago, and these 6 competencies are the ones from Baxter Healthcare. So they have critical thinking and problem solving, communication, business acumen, collaboration and teamwork, motivating and developing others, and dealing with ambiguity. Now, if you work for Baxter Healthcare, just as your day-to-day job, they would, every time they did your appraisal each year, they would concentrate on how well you'd done against these 6 core company values. If you were going for promotion, they would make sure that you were performing well against, again, these 6 core competencies. So they use them for all aspects of the organisation, not just recruitment. But if you are going for a job interview for the company here, they would need to tick you off for each of these core competencies, and they might need to ask 1 or 2 questions on each of the 6 categories before they can give you the job, basically. So it's a very structured way of doing an interview. And these big multinational companies, they have to do things in a very standard way, because you can imagine there may be a big company that has offices in Ghana, they may have offices in the UK, they may have offices in the United States, but they have to have a very standard approach to interviewing so that it's very fair and comparable across all their different offices. So they have a very standard set of interview questions, and everybody gets asked the same questions so that it keeps it very fair and standard. So they may ask a question, something along the lines of, tell me about a time when you had to solve a problem. So you would have to think back about all the experience that you've got and think of a story to tell about a time when you had to solve a problem and how you went about it. And then they might ask a question about where you've demonstrated your really good communication skills in the past. So they may say, you know, have you ever had a time where your good communication skills has been important to resolve a situation? Or tell me about a time when you worked really well in a team. So many different ways that they can word these questions. But the key to getting through, can people please turn their microphones off? All I can hear is the conversation going on. If you're not speaking, you're just listening, please can you turn your microphone off? Thank you.
Emmanuel and Erica, can you please turn your microphone off?
Thank you. Ruby.
Thank you.
So, if you went for an interview for one of these companies, the interview might be an hour in total. They would welcome you at the start, make sure you'd settled in okay, give you perhaps a glass of water, make sure you were happy, perhaps ask some of the nice, easy questions to start with about you and your choices and why you're studying where you are, etc. So that might take 10-15 minutes perhaps. They need to leave time at the end for you to ask them some questions. So they'll leave perhaps 10 minutes at the end for that. So they've probably got about 35 or 40 minutes in the middle, and they need to get through each of the company competencies. And if they've got 6 competencies and they want to ask you 2 questions on each, just to make sure, that means they've got to get through 12 questions in that 35 to 40 minutes. Now, if it takes them 30 seconds perhaps to read out the question, you've got a little bit of thinking time, and then you need to deliver your answer, perhaps 2 minutes. That's 3 minutes total per question, and you've got 12 questions to get through. So that's about 36 minutes without any gaps. They need to make some notes in between. So if they've got 40 minutes, it is really quite tight for time. So you need to be really well prepared so that in that 2-minute period, you can deliver a beautifully formatted example of where you demonstrated your communication skills or where you've helped to develop somebody else, for example. So it really is quite prescriptive. You need a really good format to be able to tell the story really accurately, and you need to deliver all the detail that they need in a really quite short space of time. So the best way to deliver the answers for these competency-based interview is using what we call STAR format. And I'll take you through what STAR stands for in a minute. But it's a really good way, hopefully it's a nice, easy word to remember, but it's a really good way to structure an answer to a question. And you can use it both in written format for application forms and also verbally, obviously in an interview. And what it does is it keeps the answer focused. It stops you rambling. I tend to find if you ask somebody a question, they tend to go straight in for the result before they set the scene. So this format helps you to set the scene for the person who's listening, tell them what you did and why, and then come to the conclusion. So hopefully it's an easy format to remember. So STAR for STAR. So the way you format this, S stands for situation. So very briefly, where were you and how long ago was it? So was this last year when you were in the second year of your degree? Was it last week when you were in your part-time job? Was it 3 years ago when you were at school? So very briefly, where were you and how long ago was it? So that only needs to be a sentence or two. Then you say what the task was. So T stands for task. So perhaps you were at your part-time job and your manager wasn't there that day. So you had to step up and manage some other colleagues. Or perhaps you were at school and you were organising an event and you are leading a team of people. Or perhaps you were doing a piece of group coursework as part of your degree and you were the finance person helping to keep the money on track. So very briefly, what it is that you were aiming to do. Again, just a sentence or two. And then we get to A, which is the action section. So we've got situation, then task, then action. And this is where you get the detail in. This is where you say step by step what you did. How many people were involved? How many hours were involved? What did you need to do in order to achieve this thing that they're asking about? So definitely a good amount of detail in there. And then very briefly at the end, summarize the outcome. So here's an example. So if they said to you, give me an example of a time where you had to demonstrate really good time management skills, you could say, okay, so the situation. So don't say the situation, the task, the action. You've got the mnemonic STAR in your head. So you're using those letters, but you're not saying them. So during my A-levels, I had a part-time job and I played violin in the school orchestra, which rehearsed twice a week after school. So we know when it is, we know where you were, and what the situation is. You're playing violin and you're doing your A-levels. The next bit, which is the task. You needed to balance everything and still get the grade you needed for university. You say, I was really determined to get into my first choice of course, which meant working really hard on my maths. You can include a little bit of humour in this. You can show your personality. So it's fine to be quite chatty, quite informal about it. So you're telling a story. So what you actually did, this is the action section. You got up really early every morning to practice your violin so that you'd done that before school. At school, used a diary to organise the schoolwork during each evening so that you could go and do your part-time job at the weekends and still have days to relax and socialise. Needed to ensure you're in bed by 10 o'clock every evening because you needed to get up early, and you also tried to fit in some exercise. So this action section is really demonstrating that you have time management skills. This is where the story needs to answer the question. So the situation just tells them where we were and how long ago it was, so they know that it's a relatively recent example. The task sets the scene, what it was we were trying to achieve, and then the action section tells that story and demonstrates that you genuinely have that time management skill. And then the little result on the end, you got the grades that you needed and still had a life while you were doing your A-levels. Okay, so that's the kind of length that you need. If you're going to write these out, I normally say maybe 400, 500 words. If you're reciting this story, obviously you're not going to recite it off a page. You need to be able to deliver it relatively easily. It needs to be delivered within 2 minutes. So this format helps you to set the scene. For the person who's listening, if you just dived in talking about your orchestra and you're relaxing and socializing and using a diary, they'd be like, hang on a minute, what is it that we're trying to achieve here? So setting the scene with that, I had a job, I played the violin, I needed to get my grades. It, for the reader who doesn't know you and doesn't know the situation, it really helps to get them understanding what it is you're about to talk about, and then really get that detail into that action section. So 2 minutes. Now, some companies do these sort of interviews in person. Some do them as video interviews. So there isn't a person to talk to. They're really hard to do. But the question would pop up. You'd log into their portal for the interview. The question pops up on the screen. Give me an example of a time when you've demonstrated your time management skills. It gives you 30 seconds to think about it, and then it starts recording you. And the time starts ticking, and you've got 2 minutes to deliver your beautifully formatted star format answer. And then at the end of 2 minutes, the camera stops. And then it gives you time to think, and then it pops up the next question on the screen. So you need to be really organised in order to do these competency-based interviews. And you need enough situations to talk about to answer perhaps 12 different questions on different topics. So they do take a huge amount of preparation. So you need to have perhaps both positive and negative examples ready. So they're never going to ask the question exactly how you're expecting. So they may say, give me an example of a time where you demonstrated, your time management skills, or give me a time when you worked in a team that worked really well together. But equally, they could ask, have you ever had to work in a team that really didn't gel? And what did you do about it? So you can still tell the story. This is where you were. This is how long ago it was. What was the team working together for? And what was it about that team that didn't work? And in those situations, they're trying to find out what you did to try and make that team work together better. Did you recognize that different people have different personalities? Did you recognize that you perhaps were being unfair to some of the other team members who didn't want to do things exactly like you did? What was it about that particular difficult person who you didn't want to work with? So yeah, you need negative examples that turned out okay, as well as all the positive examples. So you're not going to spend a lot of time writing all of these answers out, because it's unlikely that the question will be worded exactly how you expect, and it needs to sound natural and unrehearsed. But you do need to. It's absolutely fine to take a notebook into an interview like this. So you could have lots of situations written down. So different days when you're at your part-time job, different customers that you had to serve. But it's important that they're all very specific occasions. So don't talk about your part-time job as a whole or your football team as a whole. Talk about particular match that you won, or a particular season that you won the league in, or at your part-time job, a particular day when it was really busy. Perhaps it was coming up to a holiday period, for example, and you were short-staffed, or a particular difficult customer that you had to serve. Perhaps it was a really busy day and, somebody came with a complaint, or a particular team that organised a particular event. So they need to be really quite specific. Okay. Now, it's okay to repeat examples from your CV when you're in an interview. It's still you, it's all your experience, and it's absolutely fine you'll need a little bit more elaboration. Obviously, your CV is only 2 pages. There's no way you're going to get the detail in. But it's okay to pick examples that you've already got on your CV. But make sure you answer the question concisely, but that action section has plenty of detail in it. Now, if your answer hasn't been detailed enough, the interviewer may dig a little bit. So if you were asked about communication skills, for example, and you gave a really lovely example of how you dealt with a particular customer, but you hadn't actually talked about how you communicated with that person, and that was what they wanted to know, they may come back with a supplementary question and start digging in for a little bit more detail. Obviously, this is taking time. And that's what you don't want to happen. You need to be able to get these questions delivered in 2 minutes. But if your question was absolutely fine, if it had plenty of detail and the interviewer is happy with it, you deliver your nice result at the end. Okay, fine. Stop talking. Silence feels like forever in an interview, but the interviewer will need to take some notes. So once you've delivered it, just stop talking. Perhaps try and distract yourself by having a drink of water or crossing the example out of your notes, and just wait for the interviewer to ask the next question. So give them time to take some notes. They've got a lot of people to interview. They can't possibly remember it all. So let them take some notes and then just patiently wait for the next question. Don't try and leap in with more detail if they don't need it. But obviously, if you haven't included enough information, they may ask those supplementary questions. So can whoever it is who's just joined us please turn your microphone off? Who's got music? Thank you. So it's that action section that really needs to demonstrate that you genuinely have that skill that they're asking for. And if they come and ask for more details, that's when alarm bells should be ringing. Like, oh, crumbs, right, okay, I need to give more detail, because you've only got 2 minutes to deliver your answers. And if they're going to ask a supplementary question and then you need to answer, it's taking more time. And you've only got that kind of 40-minute period to get through all 12 questions. And if you don't get through all of the different company competencies, you're not going to get the job. So you need to be really organised. So what I recommend you do is you start collecting a portfolio of stories. And as I said earlier, they don't need to be complicated. The example of having good time management skills through your studies, everybody's done that. So you've all got a good example for time management already. You probably need about 15 or 20 different situations. And you could have 3 different days from a part-time job, 3 different customers that you served. You could have a time when you played in an orchestra. You could have a time when you went hiking, went camping, a time when you played sport, whatever it is. You've all worked in teams. You've all done different activities in your life. So just think about different skills that you've got from each of those different activities and think about real specific examples of specific days that you could talk about. And say they don't need to be complicated. Hobbies, university course, anything to do with your life. Ideally, they're nice and recent. So in the last couple of years, obviously the person is interviewing you now, the you that they want to employ they're not thinking about the you from 3 years ago when you were still at school. So preferably the more recent, the better. But you need to be able to tell those stories in about 2 minutes. So being really prepared and practicing on each other will put you in a really good position for an interview. So there is lots of preparation that you need to do. Those really simple starter questions, just asking about you and your choices that you've made so far, which university you studied at, and why you chose your course. They're all trying to dig into your personality and why you chose to do what you did. You understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, or your areas for development. And of course, they're going to ask why you want to work for them. That's kind of obvious. They want to see that you've prepared. But then if you're told that you're going to have a competency-based interview, they will always tell you if you're going to have one of those sorts of interviews, because you can't possibly do one of them without some preparation. If you're going to have a competency-based interview, they'll either give you a list of the company competencies at the start, or you can find them on the company website. They should be fairly obvious for most of the big companies. And if you can't find them, it's absolutely okay to contact the company. If they say you're having a competency-based interview, it's absolutely fine to email back and say, please, can you send me a list of your company competencies so that I can prepare? They'll actually be really impressed that you actually asked. Okay. So I've given Ruby a list of they're not necessarily going to be the same questions that you get in an interview, but they're a really good set of example questions. And if you had a really good answer ready for all of the questions on that sheet, you'd be pretty good for most interviews. So there's a set of the introduction questions, a set of the more probing ones, and then a set of examples of those competency-based ones that you can have a go at using star format on. Okay, so that was all I had on my slides, but I'm happy to take questions on anything that we've talked about so far, whether it was about interviews or cover letters or CVs or anything so far. So let's see what we've got. So Sebastian, do you recommend we set a formal tone when answering questions in an interview, or do we recommend we mirror whatever tone is set by the interviewer? I would mirror, Sebastian. It depends on the company. If it's a really formal company and they're all dressed in suits and ties, and they say, give me a time when you've worked in a when you've done some finances in an office, or you've had to use your decision making skills to make sure a situation turned out okay, you would try and think of a more formal example. But they're still trying to find out about you. They're trying to find out whether you fit into their organisation, whether you're going to be a nice colleague to work for. So most companies are quite relaxed in interviews anyway. They're trying to put you at ease. They're trying to find out genuinely about you. But yeah, I would mirror their tone. Just so it looks like you genuinely want to work for them. If you started being all really informal in response to a formal question, it would look like you weren't serious about them. So I would always mirror them. Okay, has anybody else got any questions? No? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully that was all
Amanda,
clear.
before you go, I've put the forms, the feedback forms on the chat. So if you could all complete the feedback form, indicate your email address, and then I'll send you the list and then the template as well.
Yeah, so there's a
of
template
what.
for a cover letter. There's a whole list of interview questions, and we can send the CV template that we did last time and the recordings of both sessions.
So kindly fill the form with your email address, and then we'll send that to you. Any more questions before we go?
No? Well, good luck, everybody, with all of your applications. Okay, I'll stop the video.
Okay.
No, how have I done that?